There are too many news organizations and news directors that think that they should tell a story the way that it should be told, and this is how the people need to hear it regardless of what the truth is.
What do you say to the conspiracy theory people who really think that the media is just covering up, you're burying the news, you're not telling the truth, you're covering up for the government, the big business, you're covering up for everybody? Today, we're continuing our look into claims of bias in the media. Is there a liberal or conservative slant to the news? How do corporate ownership and advertisers influence news coverage? Is there a wider cover-up or conspiracy at work? I'm here in San Diego with Richard Doutre Jones, Vice President and General Manager of Channel 6 XCTV, the CW affiliate here in town. Great to be here today, Richard.
Thanks for having me.
On the road here in San Diego. I appreciate coming by the station
coming to me.
At long last. So you said to me something very interesting in an email the other day. You said the media has really dropped the ball when it comes to fairness in coverage.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been probably, as somebody who was raised in the old school, when I went to college and went to my journalism classes and started out in television, fairness was everything for news coverage and journalism. I think what's happened over the years is that probably, and I think as I've tried to figure it out, mostly because of what's happening on the cable news channels, where op-ed pieces that used to be people giving opinions and editorials have turned into full-length cable news coverage, which has been taken as news. So people giving opinions, slanting the information in a way that they want people to hear it. Even worse, I think, is when newscasters and news organizations present news in such a way that they think people should hear it because that's how they think the right way to believe is, rather than allow the people to decide for themselves. And that's where I think the big difference is coming.
So you're admitting that there's bias in the news, which
I don't think there's any question about that. In any case, when I teach in college, which I do every year, I always advise the kids that they should get the book Bias and read it, because it's really a great treatise on what's been going on in terms of news gathering and news coverage.
Well, of course, one of the complaints that you usually hear is that there's a liberal bias. I mean, do you think it's in both directions? I mean, there are things like Fox News these days, or is it swinging one direction more than the other?
Well, I really think that, unfortunately, here in at San Diego 6, we bend over backwards to have balance. We don't use the word fair and balanced because that has negative connotations to it, unfortunately. But we do use the word balance.
Meaning, what's negative?
Well, I think that what's happened is because Fox News Channel, in trying to really become balanced, they say we're fair and balanced, and then people argue, well, wait a minute, you're taking a conservative slant. I would say overall that, as I've watched the coverage, though, in many of the cases that are watched, they do at least make an attempt to tell both sides of the story. We really go to great lengths to tell both sides of the story.
Well, indeed, your station's slogan is your station for balanced news,
for balanced
I believe.
news, and we take that very seriously, and there is not a day that goes by that the editorial staff doesn't review that. I think that requires a tremendous amount of self-discipline, because everybody has feelings, everybody has emotions. We just went through an incredibly difficult political campaign where there were feelings on all sides. Well, everybody has different feelings about that, but it is not the purvey of the news department or the television station to try to unduly influence what the viewers might think. Our job is to present the facts, give people the most complete information, and then allow them to make their own decisions. I think what's happened is that too often now news organizations try to influence how the people believe by slanting that in certain ways. And you can do that in subtle ways as well, just by the way you tell the story, by the way you cut your video, by the way you leave things out. I've seen some pretty distressing things as I've reviewed what's going on in the media.
So how do you keep your station from doing that? How do you keep your own personal, the reporters' feelings out?
Well, we talk about it. The news director and the assistant news director, every day in the editorial meetings, goes through and reviews the subjects. We've had, since Proposition 8 passed, of course, there's been a great outcry on different things that have happened, and I think as I look and review the stories that we've done, one thing that we try to do is say, are we giving both sides to this issue? Are we giving correct facts? Or are we telling half-truths? Or are we just getting information that comes from one side and one side's publicist and using that without double-checking the facts? So those are ways that you can find out if you're giving balance. Because in the end, we shouldn't believe that we're smarter than our viewers. We should allow the viewers to say, here's what the news is, let's decide for ourselves. And we really appreciate the fact that San Diego 6 News is giving us that opportunity rather than trying to tell us how we should believe.
Well, I thought it was interesting beforehand, your staff was telling me that you actually take emails from the viewers and respond or include them in the newscast in some way.
We do that. We've been doing that now for a couple of years. Also, we had a pretty there's fires going out in Montecito right now as we're speaking. I can barely watch those without shuddering, since we've had in the last 4 years 2 major fire events that happened here in San Diego. We had people inside our station directly affected by those that came within a half mile of my house both times. Many of my neighbors lost their homes. That is when it really started for me as the general manager, where I started answering many emails during that period of time. And what's happened now is there's probably not a week that goes by that I don't answer anywhere from 100 to 120 emails from our viewers that write in. But what we do is we pass them out. Everybody gets a chance at answering those emails, whether it's me, whether it's somebody in the newsroom, whether it's a producer, whether it's a talent, but we all take turns answering depending on what the questions are or the comments by the viewers, because if you look at it, they're really our customers, they're our constituents, from a political standpoint, if you want, and they deserve the right to be answered and be responded to when they have concerns or questions.
Well, I thought it was interesting, Jackson, your production manager, told me actually too that it helps kind of raise the bar for objectivity, because you're going to be called on it, if people are going to be emailing.
You know what? You're absolutely right. Jackson's correct, because when and you know what? Sometimes the viewers are right. We screw up. We make a mistake. Just recently, I had to apologize to a whole group of people because something that we did, the way we handled a certain subject, we didn't do as well as we could have. And it's interesting because when you come back and you say, yes, you're right, we should have done that better, and here's how we're going to improve. I find that the people respond positive. 99% of the time, they'll respond back and say, gee, thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time. And sometimes it'll turn their feelings around.
Well, one of the other big claims these days is corporate ownership. That is, and if I may say so, you used to be affiliated with Fox.
Yes, we were a Fox affiliate for 22 years, the very first one.
And so people have the feeling that, Rupert Murdoch is writing your evening newscast, or the chairman of CBS if you're CW, How does corporate ownership affect your newscast? And are you taking orders from headquarters, and would you criticize CBS or Warner Brothers or Time Warner if something came up?
That's a great question. I have to say, if we're going to be completely honest, there are probably times, depending upon what the ownership is, that people are influenced or certain things do happen.
Directly or indirectly?
More of an indirect, I think, because of people's fears and what happens. Although I've heard from my friends at various times that, sometimes you need to stand up and be counted for something. As one of the great things about being a local television station is that you have a local responsibility to your viewers. You have a local responsibility to give them the best information possible, regardless of how that shakes out for your corporate structure or who owns you or who does something else. We're in a very unique position because we're owned by one of the largest broadcast companies in the world, Grupo Televisa, out of Mexico City. They are huge in terms of an entity. Well, we sit right here on the border, and lately, over the last, I'm sure you've heard about, over the last several months, there's been some pretty tough drug wars going across the border in Tijuana. We've never hesitated to tell stories and gotten in, and actually have been given help by our sister station, Channel 12, across the border with some of the information to tell the stories. Never once have I heard anything but do what you're supposed to do, tell the stories accurately, just be honest on how you tell them and don't slant them. And that's what we've done.
Well, we're running out of time, but one thing I would ask you is, another claim is that advertisers, let's say if car companies are big for you, are you going to criticize Ford or General Motors if they're paying the bill?
Well, let me answer that two ways. One, editorial content at this station is never interfered with, ever. It just is not. That's a rule that we've put in place and adhered to. However, we have an investigative reporter, and I can tell you over the years, we've had a couple instances where maybe a local car dealer has done something that they were less proud of, and if we find out about it, what we'll do is we'll a lot of times contact that dealer and say, hey, listen, here's what we've discovered. What do you want to do about it? I can think of at least 4 times off the top of my head where rather than the story changed completely, where we said something to the effect, here, this person had a problem, they rectified it, and the dealer dealt with it in a responsible way. And so there's a lot of times you have the opportunity not just to smash somebody, but to do something positive to help turn things around. But we would never, ever, regardless of who our advertisers are, if they were doing something that wasn't right, then we would talk about it.
Well, and finally, one thing that, when I get into a taxi, I always say one thing, I start hearing the conspiracy theories these days, that it's all a cover-up, the government and the media are in on it, history, or, you know what's really going down and you're not telling people. What do you say to the conspiracy theory people who really think that the media is just covering up, you're burying the news, you're not telling the truth, you're covering up for the government, the big business, you're covering up for everybody. You know what's really going down, but you're just covering up everything.
Well, I wish we did know everything because we talk about it.
Ratings, right?
That's right. It actually gives us great ratings to talk about it. I have never, I think people get that opinion because of where they see the perceived bias in the news. You have to remember again that, and this is, I think, what really started the Fox News organization out, because the perception was, wait a minute, everything is slanting far over to the liberal side of things and only giving one side of the story, so let's tell another side of the story. The truth of the matter is, if you think about that, there shouldn't be different sides. But in colleges and universities, there is definitely more of a liberal movement and a different point of view, and so people tend to move more in that direction. I think that's where, quotes, conspiracy comes from. I don't think it's a conspiracy, an active conspiracy. I think it's simply that if you have biases and prejudices, those tend to leach out around the edges, and sometimes you find yourself, without knowing it, being biased because, you know what? You might not even realize you are, because in your world, you're telling what you think the right story is. So that's where, again, the critical importance of having balance and being a good journalist comes to giving both sides to every story, which is why I'm proud of the fact that we have that discipline here. But in truth, that doesn't happen across the board, because sometimes it keeps going back to the fact that there are too many news organizations and news directors that think that they should tell a story the way that it should be told, and this is how the people need to hear it, regardless of what the truth is.
I'm so sorry we're out of time. Richard,
well,
thank you very
much.
I appreciate
you having me.
Richard Doutre Jones, absolutely. I know the audience is going to love this one. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.